All around me are bodies of water filled with exotic fish. I'll be exploring different locations in search for one, to see if I can land one of these rare fish and raise it as my new pet. But keeping a wild fish and building an army is going to have its challenges. Between catching it and building it an ecosystem, this journey will put us in uncharted territory, turning a rare fish into a pet. Before we can go out and catch our new fish, we need to build a tank that could handle the fish we could potentially catch. I have a 29-gallon tank ready to become a home for a lucky fish. With this tank, there are 3 potential fish we could catch that would fit this aquarium. A baby mine cichlid, small tilapias, or a beautiful jewel cichlid. So let's build a tank that could house any of these fish. I had some leftover rocks from my goldfish build and decided it would be cool to build the substrate completely out of rocks. But these rocks needed a quick rinse because they were quite dirty. Since I wasn't using any sand, I needed to cover the bottom with egg crates. After customizing the egg crates to have everything covered, I could fill the tank with all our clean rocks. This is going to offer our fish a place to explore and seek cover. I filled the tank up slowly, hoping there wasn't any leaks, because this tank hadn't been used in a while. Once we were in the clear, we needed to figure out what we were going to do about the plants. I normally use live plants in my setups, but all 3 of these fish we could catch today are known for destroying plants. So I headed to the pet store to pick up some fake ones. They had a ton of options that didn't look very natural. Luckily, I found this pack that looked kinda real. These are going to add a pop of color in here and give our fish some more places to seek cover. This is the first time I have ever really used fake plants, and honestly, they aren't that bad. But there was one live plant that I wasn't willing to leave out of this build. Inside of one of my established aquariums was a massive piece of driftwood that had been growing Anubias for months. And unlike most plants, Anubias is incredibly tough. Plus, this is going to help establish this new setup. Speaking of established, I also took the sponge filter from my quarantine tank to filter this new setup. That sponge has been filtering water for months, which means it's already packed with beneficial bacteria that will help break down fish waste. Between the mature driftwood, the established filter, and all the hiding places we've added, this aquarium is looking like a pretty awesome home for whatever fish we end up catching today. Leave a comment down below predicting which fish we are going to catch for this tank. Okay, let's let the tank filter for a bit and then we'll go on our mission. After a couple days, our tank was ready and it was time to go on the hunt. Before we catch anything, we need a plan. Around the lab, there's multiple spots filled with all kinds of fish. Each spot offers something completely different. So I grabbed my rod, loaded up my gear, and headed to our first location. The first spot is my local canal. This place is loaded with all kinds of fish. I set up a tank so we could take a closer look at any of the fish we catch here. With the tank ready, I started to scout out the water. Within seconds of checking out the bank, I spotted a swarm of fish. Then right underneath them, I spotted something orange. This guy would be perfect for a tank. So I didn't waste any time and started to bait up a tiny hook. After a couple casts, I wasn't having much luck. But finally, I got a bite at the same spot I spotted the orange fish. Unfortunately, it wasn't him. This is a mine cichlid, one of the 3 fish I was expecting to catch. These guys are pretty awesome. However, when I got this guy into the tank, he was huge. Plus, this guy is probably not done growing. So, after taking a quick look, I got back to our mission. I kept casting along the shoreline, carefully working my bait through the same area where I had first spotted it. Some time passed and nothing was taking the bait, so I switched over to my dip net. Once I saw the swarm of little fish, I swung at them. On my first attempt, I caught something. This is a mosquito fish, and despite being one of the smallest fish in the canal, these little guys are actually pretty cool. They're live bearers, which means they give birth to fully formed baby fish instead of laying eggs. They're also incredibly hardy and can survive in places where a lot of other fish can't. The problem is, they're not exactly what I had in mind for a new pet fish. So, after taking a closer look, I released him and went back to netting. I saw movement in the grass line and made my move. It was another mine cichlid. This one's colors were not as noticeable as the last one. I got it into the tank to see if I could keep it. But this guy couldn't even use our 29-gallon as a grow-out tank. After being here for a couple hours, I was starting to realize the spot wasn't going to give us the fish we were looking for. So I made my way to another location. This is a pond with a culvert. A culvert is basically a massive underwater tunnel, and honestly, I have no idea what's living inside of it. As soon as I walked up to the edge, I could see movement everywhere. I could tell the spot had more species of fish here than the last one. Swimming with all the other fish was another beautiful orange fish. I wanted to redeem myself and catch this little guy. But as I started to cast my bait into the pond, I realized this colorful guy wasn't interested in my bait either. However, this culvert was home to other fish that were all over my bait. These guys were super aggressive. Once my bait hit the water, they attacked it like a group of piranhas. In the beginning, I was losing the battle. It didn't matter where I dropped the hook. Within seconds, I was surrounded. Fish coming in from every direction. Hitting the bait, missing it, coming back again. It was non-stop. And what was crazy was how fast they found it. It wasn't just one or two fish. It was a full swarm. Every cast turned into a competition. Whoever got to the bait first got the meal. And if one fish missed it, another one was right behind to take its place. These guys were built to steal food. But after a couple casts, I started to land a couple fish. This was a different species than what we were catching at the last spot. It looks to be a type of tilapia. These fish have a ton of personality. I would keep one in a setup, but this guy would outgrow my current setup in a heartbeat. I still want that orange fish, but it looks like bread isn't the right bait for it. It seems like all the fish at this culvert are going to be too big for our 29-gallon. So I made my way down to the bank to see if I could spot any smaller fish. I started to chum the water, and there were hundreds of little fish going crazy for the bread. As one piece of bread floated down, it got intercepted almost immediately. It was a colorful fish that liked the bait I was fishing with. This could be the spot that I landed our new pet. I jerked my bait in the water, and the little fish emerged from the plants. These little guys were a little tricky to catch, but I kept trying. Finally, one shot forward and started eating the bread, and I was able to set the hook. Got him. This is a jewel cichlid. Right away, you can see why it's named a jewel. It has these beautiful glowing spots. But not only is this guy stunning, it's perfect for a build. Jewel cichlids don't get huge like mines or tilapias. The hunt was over, but our mission was just getting started. With the fish in the bucket, I got back to the lab. I slowly acclimated it to the water, letting it adjust to the temperature and chemistry of the tank. And once it was ready, I released it into his new home. Right now our fish was stressed and had been through a lot. Its colors were washed out and it was still gorgeous. I added some more oxygen to the tank and turned off the aquarium light to let him settle in. This cichlid may be stressed, but it won the lottery. You see, these jewel cichlids aren't at the top of the food chain in the wild. Their life is a non-stop mix of survival, feeding, and territory. They stay out of open water and stick to structure. They're constantly in competition for food, darting at insects, algae bites, and crustaceans. But don't let their pretty colors and small size fool you. They're an invasive fish that has thrived in my local ponds and canals. A couple hours later, I checked on our new pet and found him tucked in the rocks. Looks like our substrate choice is providing plenty of cover for our fish. And even better, you could already start to see a hint of color coming back. I kept the lights off for the next 24 hours, and our little fish was slowly getting comfortable in the tank. Finally, he started to explore beyond the hiding spots in the rocks. He was still low to the ground, but for a wild fish to be in a tank and be this comfortable shows you how adaptable the species is. Now that our new fish is looking much better, it was time to focus on the next challenge, getting him to eat. I was confident our cichlid was ready for its first meal. On day 2, I found the jewel searching his new home for something to munch on. It was a good sign that he was already interested in finding food. We saw that the cichlids in the wild love bread, but that won't be something we'll be feeding our new pet. Live food will be cool to feed him since he probably has developed some sharp hunting skills. But for now, I'll see how he reacts to some pellets. These are going to give him the nutrients he needs to develop into a healthy fish. I dropped the first pellet in and our fish came over and tested it with a quick nip. Once he got it down, it looked like he was searching for more. I threw a second one in and our cichlid snatched it up before it hit the rocks. Our new fish wasn't at the top full of confidence waiting for more, but it was ready to trust me and try whatever I threw in the tank. A week later, our jewel cichlid is front and center, looking very healthy and comfortable in its new home, claiming every corner of this tank. Now, there wasn't any other inhabitants in the tank, but his confidence wasn't something to ignore. Coming up, we'll be adding some cool new additions to the tank. But to show you just how much this fish has changed, let's feed him some more pellets again. This time, our jewel isn't waiting for the pellets to drop to the bottom. He's locked in at the top of the tank, waiting to snipe any food I throw in. These pellets are made for cichlids, and are great for the foundation of his diet. But pellets are just the staples. Now, let's feed our little guy something a little more exciting. Live redworms. These guys are packed with protein and full of fat. I put one against the tank to see our jewel's reaction. This thing is pretty massive, so let's cut him off a little piece and see how he reacts. As I was cutting the worm, it deployed its defense mechanism. It released this thick yellow slime. When worms get stressed or injured, they push out a cyclomic fluid, kind of like a last resort survival reaction, to try and confuse predators. Before I drop this into the tank, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. Once the worm was ready to go, our cichlid was standing by. As the worm hit the water, our fish was on it, trying his best to break it down, spitting it out and readjusting his attack. So, my fish wasn't being picky, his instincts were working exactly the way they were supposed to. He wanted the worm. This was a wild predator, trying to handle a tough, moving prey the only way it knows how. Once he was settled into a spot, I noticed our little guy was making room for the big piece of worm. He let out a big poop. Now that we saw what a beast our fish is, let's take it to the next level and see what our mini predator does when we submerge the whole worm in the tank. At first, our little guy was a little overwhelmed, hesitant to bite it. But after a few seconds, our cichlid went to predator mode, ripping at the worm, tearing off chunks. This little guy was like a mini piranha. I couldn't tell if this guy had teeth, but with the way he was ripping at the worm, it seemed like it. I did a quick search online and found that jewel cichlids do have teeth. These guys really are mini predators. But after feeding our cichlid the worm, I realized I made a big mistake with this tank. Our jewel cichlids are from warm tropical waters of Africa, and they need stable heat to thrive. And somehow, I completely missed something critical. There was no heater in the tank. Thankfully, I had one in one of my supply boxes. Now with the tank set up correctly, my goal is to identify the gender of this little guy and see if I can pair it up with another male or female. If I want to find this fish a boyfriend or girlfriend, I'm going to need more jewel cichlids, which means it's time to build a matchmaking tank. I grabbed a larger aquarium and started getting it ready for our future project. This 60-gallon has a long footprint that I can create separate zones with. Using egg crate panels and a handful of suction cups, I divided the tank into multiple sections. This setup would allow the fish to see each other without actually being able to fight. Once the tank was filled up, I placed some established sponge filters into the aquarium to kickstart it. This time, I made sure to install a heater in the tank, along with some rocks to give the fish some structure. A week later, our tank was ready and I headed back out to our fishing spot. But this time, I came prepared. After seeing how aggressive our jewel cichlid attacked those worms, I had an idea. I decided to test out if worms are better than bread for bait. These worms were massive, so I cut a little piece off and got it hooked up. As soon as my bait hit the water, the fish darted out to attack it. Catching these guys was a little tricky. They were smart enough to nibble on the worm without getting hooked. But sooner or later, I was able to time it just right and caught our first fish. With our new tank setup, I can keep 3. So, now with 1 secured in the bucket, we got 2 more to go. 2 minutes later, I ended up catching something a little different. This is a mine cichlid. Not what we were looking for, but leave a comment down below if I should build a tank and raise one of these guys. I was able to salvage our worm and toss it right back out. Just like that, I caught another one. With 2 in the bucket, using worm as bait is looking like a great option for these little predators. A few casts later, we secured our last slaughter. Jewel cichlid number 3 is now in the bucket, and our mission is now complete. I'm hoping one of these guys is going to pair up nicely with the jewel we have in our 29-gallon. But before we head back to the lab, we have a side quest we have to complete. Every time I come out fishing, I notice trash in the ponds and canals. So if nature is going to provide me with a fish, I should leave it a little better than I found it. I came back with the correct supplies and got to work. Let's see how much trash we can pick up in 30 minutes. There was all types of stuff out here. It was sad to see because this place is filled with wildlife. A mama duck was swimming by with her babies, and a little farther down the bank, an iguana was soaking up the sun. During my cleanup, I even found this old fishing lure. When the 30 minutes were up, our bag was pretty heavy. I weighed it and the scale read 13.46 pounds. Of course, I made sure to throw out everything we collected. If you're spending time outdoors, try leaving it a little better than you found it. Even picking up a few pieces of trash can make a difference. With all 3 fish secured, it was time to head back to the lab. I carefully acclimated the fish to the tank and got them into their own section. With all 3 fish settling into their new homes, there wasn't much left to do besides wait. It was time for their colors, personalities, and hopefully their genders to become more obvious. Back in our 29-gallon, our jewel has become a beast.
Hey, where have you been, buddy?
This guy is always front and center demanding food. This guy has been in here for a month now. He's clearly used to the tank lifestyle. But will he still hit a bait on a line? This is my mini fishing rod. I decided to put him to the test and see if he will still strike out a bait on a line. Obviously, I'm not using a hook, just line tied to the bait. Once I casted the worm into the tank, our little guy came flying over, ripping at the bait but not enough to break it off. But our jewel was relentless, attacking the piece of worm until he took it clean off the line. I kept throwing in more pieces and this guy was ferocious, striking the bait just like it did in the wild. Our jewel cichlid started pulling with everything it had, trying to drag the worm back to the bottom of the tank. Every time I pulled the bait away, he charged right back in and hit it again. Our cichlid did not care if there was tension, it was ready for the battle. So I decided to level it up and cast in the whole worm. The cichlid absolutely hammered it. The line instantly went tight. Our jewel cichlid started pulling with everything it had, trying to drag the worm back to the bottom of the tank. The battle lasted way longer than I expected, but eventually the worm ripped free. Now, our mini predator had a giant worm he was swimming around with. Little by little, it was trying to break it down. Eventually, the worm got under the rocks and I had to intervene. Honestly, doing this little experiment with the mini fishing rod was so cool. Seeing how much of a beast this guy is never gets old. Now, let's see how our 3 jewels are doing in the 60-gallon. At first, I did not see much activity. All 3 of the fish were using the rocks and filters as coverage. But as time passed, I started to notice a difference in personalities in these cichlids. The middle one was the first one to emerge and start to explore. This jewel didn't seem aggressive, just curious. But after a while, I started noticing something interesting. Whenever the cichlid on the middle was next to the divider on the right, the cichlid would start to peek out a bit. But when he hovered on the left side, the cichlid on the left would just stay hidden. Eventually, the one on the left tried to explore beyond the rocks, and once he saw me or the other cichlid, it darted back into hiding. The one in the middle started to develop an appetite. He was striking at stuff on the water column and nipping at the rocks, just like our first cichlid did when I put him in the 29. This was a good indicator that they were ready to feed. These cichlids may be living in an aquarium now, but they still haven't fully adjusted to tank life. So, for their first meal, I decided to offer them some live food. Luckily, I already had the perfect food source. This is Dino, my snapping turtle. Hidden throughout his tank is a thriving colony of mosquito fish. A few months ago, I caught these guys and threw a couple into my snapping turtle's tank. Some of them have been able to avoid our turtle and thrive in here. But grabbing these guys out is going to be pretty difficult with Dino. So, I created a divider with some egg crate inspired from the cichlid build. I made sure to stack up some hardscape so Dino can't barge in while I'm trying to collect some mosquito fish. Dino was pretty confused. Instead of using a net to scoop these guys up, I decided to build a DIY fish trap. I grabbed an empty water bottle and cut the top off. Then, I flipped the top section around and pushed it back into the bottle, creating a funnel. I made sure to secure it with some zip ties, and just like that, we had a mini fish trap. Baiting the trap with some bread would intrigue our fish to swim right in. Looks like Dino finds the trap appetizing. Let's hope the mosquito fish think the same. Some time passed by, and none of the fish were really by the trap. But after a few minutes, the mosquito fish were starting to populate the area. Then, one of the fish decided to take a closer look and take a nip at the bottle. Little by little, the fish were getting more comfortable with the trap. They kept taking quick nips at it, and just when I thought one of them was going to go in any second now, Dino came storming through, tearing down our wall, which scared all of our fish away. So I set the wall back up with some more rocks and placed our trap back in. A couple hours later, I came back to our trap, and when I pulled it up to check it out, I saw some movement at the bottom. The trap worked. I got them into a holding container and brought them over to the 60-gallon. Finally, it was feeding time. I dropped the fish in, and to my surprise, the guppy was able to swim around for a bit. But I did not take my eyes off this little guy. When the fish reached the bottom of the tank, our cichlid on the right came darting over and swallowed the feeder instantly. That was a cool eat, but nothing prepared me for the next strike. As the second guppy was swimming at the surface, without warning, a cichlid launched upward like a missile. In a split second, the guppy disappeared. I immediately replayed the footage, and somehow it looked even crazier in slow motion. These fish might not be the biggest predators in the aquarium hobby, but when it's feeding time, they definitely know how to put on a show. The last guppy was a bit bigger than the other two. It kept swimming between each section. Eventually, the cichlids started to take their crack at it, but none of them were able to devour the bigger fish. The feeder was simply too large for the cichlids to comfortably eat. So instead of forcing the issue, I scooped them back up and returned them to the tank I caught them from. Over the next couple weeks, our jewels began to settle in, and now we can get a better idea of their gender. Each one of them had their own colors, patterns, and behaviors. Over on the left, jewel number 1 remained shy and timid. It spends most of its time hiding behind the filter, using it as a place to take shelter. In the middle, the second jewel was much more confident. It did not hide from me at all. This little guy was out and about in its section, and from time to time, the fish even escapes its zone and sneaks into another fish's area. Lastly, on the right is the third fish. This one is territorial. Whenever the middle fish would slide under, the right fish would chase it around and attack it. I wouldn't want that to be the fish we introduced to our jewel in the 29-gallon. The one in the middle is looking like the best candidate. This fish also might be a female. Meanwhile, the jewel cichlid waiting in the 29-gallon is showing signs that it could be a male. But before we drop it into the tank, I'm going to place another barrier into the aquarium and let them get used to seeing each other. Once the barrier was in place, I scooped up our best match. This cichlid was able to avoid the net for a bit, swimming between each section. But with a quick scoop, I got her. After a quick acclimation, our cichlid was ready for the tank. For the first couple hours, our fish was in hiding, while our main one was super excited, wondering what was happening. 10 hours later, the jewel started to get comfortable on its side. With the new fish in the tank, I started to notice our main cichlid becoming more colorful. This is a great sign. Jewel cichlids communicate by displaying their colors. Some more time passed and the two started to interact between the barrier. Then I started to notice our main cichlid was trying to make his way to the other side. But this doesn't mean we can trust them. Cichlids can change in a second. So when we lift this barrier, we have to monitor the behavior. It was the next day and I was ready to pull the barrier. But there was something I had to do first. Give them a meal separately. As I was feeding our first fish, our main one was super jealous. I started to throw in food at the same time, and we could see just how much more comfortable one is than the other. It was a cool experiment, but I decided to wait a bit longer. After 72 hours, I decided to lift the barrier. Our main jewel was right out in the open, patrolling the tank. The new fish had a very different plan, staying out of sight. But in less than a minute, our main one spotted the fish and darted over. The chase was on. Back and forth they went, weaving through the rocks, plants, and decorations. Occasionally, there were some breaks, which was a great sign. But for the next 30 minutes, the aggression stayed the same. I decided to reintroduce the barrier to give the cichlids more time to adjust to each other. Our original jewel had spent weeks claiming this tank as his territory, and 3 days simply wasn't enough for them to get used to each other. For now, we're gonna have to put our cichlid army on hold. If you have any ideas for a community tank, let me know down in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this project. Please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.